Your brain defaults to problems. That's killing your progress. What if one mental shift unlocked every stuck situation? Most people replay failures. Solution thinkers design exits. You'll learn why anxiety loops exist and how to break them. 5 minutes from now, you'll never see obstacles the same way. Right now, your brain is running an outdated operating system. It's built for a world that no longer exists, scanning constantly for threats that rarely materialize, replaying conversations that already happened, rehearsing disasters that probably won't come. This isn't your fault. It's evolution. But here's the problem. What kept your ancestors alive on the savannah is keeping you stuck in traffic, stuck in arguments, stuck in your career, stuck in patterns that drain you dry. I'm going to tell you about two people. Both faced the same problem. Only one of them found a way out. The difference wasn't intelligence, resources, or luck. The difference was a single mental shift that you're about to learn. Sarah sat in her car in the parking garage for 20 minutes after work, gripping the steering wheel, replaying the meeting. Her boss had dismissed her proposal without explanation, again, for the third time this quarter. She could feel her jaw clenching as she ran through everything she should have said, all the arguments she could have made, all the reasons her idea was actually brilliant. Why did he always do this? Why couldn't he see what was so obvious to everyone else? Why was she even working at this company? The questions spiraled, each one tightening the knot in her chest. By the time she drove home, she had convinced herself to start looking for a new job, update her resume, maybe even consider a career change entirely. She spent the evening on job boards, feeling simultaneously righteous and terrified. Meanwhile, across town, Michael left the exact same kind of meeting. His client had rejected his pitch, the one he'd worked on for 6 weeks. He sat in his office for 5 minutes, feeling the disappointment wash through him like a wave. It sucked, no question. Then he opened his notebook and wrote at the top of a fresh page, what would make the next pitch land? He sat with the question. No immediate answers came, and that was fine. He wrote 3 more questions underneath it. What did the client actually need that I missed? Who else has won them over and how? What's one element I can test differently next time? 20 minutes later, he had a list of 5 people to call, 2 modifications to try, and a coffee meeting scheduled with a colleague who'd worked with this client before. He went home tired but clear. 3 months later, Sarah was still at her job, still replaying meetings, now also replaying job interviews that didn't result in offers, creating new loops about why she wasn't getting hired, wondering what was wrong with her, what she was doing wrong, why nothing ever worked out. Michael had won over his difficult client, learned a new approach that worked with skeptical decision-makers, and was teaching his methodology to the rest of his team. Same problem. 2 completely different outcomes. The variable wasn't talent. It was the direction their brains moved after the setback. Sarah's brain moved backward. Michael's moved forward. That's the difference between problem mode and solution mode, and it changes everything. Let me be clear about something right now. This isn't about positive thinking. This isn't about pretending problems don't exist or slapping affirmations over genuine pain. If someone tells you to just think positive when your world is falling apart, you have my permission to walk away from that conversation. What we're talking about is something entirely different and far more powerful. We're talking about training your brain to face reality fully, acknowledge what hurts, and then ask the only question that actually generates movement. What now? Your brain has a negativity bias. This is not a flaw in your character. This is neurology. Your ancestors who stopped to appreciate the sunset got eaten by predators. Your ancestors who constantly scanned for danger, who remembered every threat, who replayed every close call, those are the ones who survived long enough to pass on their genes. To you, congratulations, you inherited a brain that's phenomenal at spotting problems and terrible at letting them go. The issue is that in the modern world, most of what your brain flags as a threat isn't actually dangerous. A critical email is not a tiger. An awkward conversation is not a cliff edge. Your mortgage payment is not a famine. But your amygdala doesn't know the difference. It sounds the alarm, floods your system with cortisol, narrows your focus to the threat, and suddenly you're trapped in a loop, thinking about the same problem in the same way, going nowhere. This is what I call the problem trap. It's the cognitive equivalent of spinning your tires in mud. Lots of motion, lots of noise, lots of energy spent, zero forward movement. You've been there. Everyone has. You know that feeling when you can't stop thinking about something, when your mind keeps returning to it like a tongue to a sore tooth, When you lie awake at 3 in the morning running simulations of arguments that already happened, or disasters that might happen. When you bore your friends with the same complaint for the 15th time. When you know you're obsessing but you can't seem to stop because maybe if you just think about it one more time you'll figure it out. That's the problem trap. And here's the thing that makes it so insidious. It feels productive. Your brain convinces you that all this analysis, all this rumination, all this mental churning is actually accomplishing something. It feels like you're working on the problem. You're not. You're rehearsing it. You're strengthening the neural pathways associated with anxiety and helplessness. You're training your brain to see obstacles as permanent and yourself as powerless. Every minute you spend in problem mode is a minute you're not spending in solution mode. And the cost of that compounds over time in ways that will break your heart if you let it continue. Think about your relationships. How many arguments have you had that were just the same argument in different clothing? The same patterns playing out again and again because both people were stuck in problem mode, focused on what the other person did wrong, what they always do, why they never change. Instead of asking what might actually improve things, think about your career. How many opportunities have you missed because you were paralyzed by analysis, running endless scenarios in your head, catastrophizing about everything that could go wrong? Instead of testing something small and learning from it, think about your health. How many times have you skipped the workout or eaten the thing you said you wouldn't because you were already feeling bad about yourself? Already in a shame spiral about your body or your discipline, making the problem worse by staying stuck in the problem? The cost is staggering when you add it up. Years of your life spent in loops that go nowhere. Energy that could have built something wasted on rehashing what already happened. Relationships that could have deepened, fractured instead by the same unresolved patterns. A career that could have soared, stalled by paralysis. A body that could have felt strong, weakened by neglect, born of shame. This is not an exaggeration. This is what happens when you let your brain's default settings run your life. But here's the good news, and I mean genuinely good news. Your brain can be rewired. Neuroplasticity is not a buzzword. It's a biological fact. The neural pathways you use most often get stronger. The ones you don't use atrophy. Right now, your problem-focused pathways are superhighways because you've been driving on them your whole life. Your solution-focused pathways might be barely visible trails, but every single time you catch yourself starting to spiral and redirect your attention toward what's possible instead of what's wrong, you're widening that solution pathway. Every single time. It doesn't feel like much in the moment, but over weeks and months, those tiny redirections add up to a completely different brain, a completely different life. I need you to understand something about how change actually works. Because if you don't get this, you'll give up too early. When you start practicing solution mode, it will feel awkward and forced. Your brain will resist. It will tell you this is fake, this is uncomfortable, this isn't who you are, you're just pretending, everyone can see through it. You should go back to what's familiar. That voice is not wisdom. That's just your brain preferring the known over the unknown, even when the known is miserable. You're not being fake when you practice solution thinking. You're being intentional. There's a massive difference. Every skill you have now, every single one, felt awkward at first. Walking felt awkward. Talking felt awkward. Reading felt awkward. Driving felt awkward. The first time you did anything that's now automatic, it was clumsy and self-conscious and exhausting. Then you practiced. You fell down. You corrected. You tried again. And eventually it became so natural you don't even think about it anymore. Solution mode is the same. Right now it might feel like trying to write with your non-dominant hand. 6 months from now it'll be automatic. But only if you actually practice, and only if you don't quit during the awkward phase. So let's talk about what solution mode actually is, because I need to distinguish it clearly from things it's not. Solution mode is not pretending problems don't exist. It's not toxic positivity. It's not good vibes only nonsense that makes you feel worse when you're already struggling. Solution mode has 3 components, and all 3 are essential. First, acknowledgement. Second, redirection. After you've acknowledged the reality and the feeling, you consciously shift your attention from what's wrong to what's possible. This is where the work happens. This is the fork in the road where Sarah went left and Michael went right. You ask yourself a different kind of question. Not why did this happen? Not whose fault is this? Not why does this always happen to me? Those questions generate more pain, not more options. Instead, you ask, what do I want instead? What's one small thing I could try? What's worked in similar situations before? What would I tell a friend to do? Who might have solved something like this? What resources do I have that I'm not seeing right now? Third, design. You take action, even if it's tiny. Even if you're not sure it'll work. You build something, you test something, you reach out to someone, you try one small experiment. You move your body from mental churning into physical reality. This is what breaks the loop. Not thinking about solutions, doing something, anything, that points you forward. Acknowledgement, redirection, design. Feel it, redirect it, act on it. That's the framework. Simple to understand, hard to execute when you're triggered, but it gets easier with practice until it becomes your new default. Let me take you through what this looks like in real time. Close your eyes if you're in a position to do so safely. If you're driving, obviously don't close your eyes, but you can still follow along. I want you to imagine a problem you're currently facing. Nothing catastrophic, just something that's been bothering you, something you've been thinking about more than you'd like. Picture it clearly. Notice where you feel it in your body. Is there tension in your shoulders? Tightness in your chest? A knot in your stomach? Just notice. Don't try to change it. Now notice the thoughts that come with it. What are you telling yourself about this problem? Listen to the actual words your inner voice is using. Are they harsh? Hopeless? Blaming? Just observe without judgment. Now I want you to imagine that this problem is an object you're holding in your hands. What does it look like? What's its weight? Its texture? Is it heavy? Rough? Cold? Hold it for a moment. Feel the weight of it. And now imagine setting it down on a table in front of you. You're not throwing it away. You're not pretending it doesn't exist. You're just setting it down so you can look at it from a slight distance. It's still there. You can pick it back up anytime. But right now it's on the table and you're standing back just a bit. Take a breath. And from this position, with a little bit of space between you and the problem, ask yourself, what do I actually want instead of this? Not in a fantasy world. In reality, what would be different if this situation improved even a little bit? And then ask, what's one small thing I could try this week that might move me toward that? Not a complete solution, not a miracle, just one small thing. Let an answer come. Don't force it. Just see what bubbles up when you give your brain a forward-facing question instead of a backward-focused one. When you have something, even if it's tiny, you can open your eyes. That's what the shift feels like from the inside. It's not dramatic. It doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like a slight change in perspective, a small release of tension, a sense that you have just a little bit more agency than you thought you did 10 seconds ago. That's enough. That's the crack where the light gets in. Now let's talk about the specific techniques that make this shift possible. Starting with the most crucial skill, interrupting the rumination cycle before it picks up speed. Because here's what happens if you don't. Your brain starts with one thought. Maybe it's something small. He didn't respond to my text. That's the seed. Then your brain adds to it. Maybe he's mad at me. Then it builds. I probably said something wrong in our last conversation. Then it accelerates. I always do this. I'm terrible at relationships. Nobody actually likes me. They just tolerate me. I'm going to end up alone. Within 5 minutes, you've gone from an unreturned text to existential despair about dying alone. And the whole time it felt logical. It felt like you were just following the thread of reality. This is the rumination flywheel. And it's one of the most destructive patterns your brain runs. The longer it spins, the faster it goes, the harder it is to stop. Which means the only winning strategy is to interrupt it early, in the first 30 seconds, before it builds momentum. You need circuit breakers installed in your mind, and you need to know how to flip them fast. Physical interrupts work because your brain and body are not separate systems. When your thoughts are spiraling, your body is responding, muscles tensing, breath shallowing, heart rate increasing. If you change your physical state, you change your mental state. It's not metaphorical, it's mechanical. So when you feel the beginning of a loop, you move. Literally, stand up if you're sitting. If you're standing, drop and do 10 push-ups. Go outside and sprint to the end of the block. Splash cold water on your face. Hold an ice cube in your hand. Put on a song and dance like an idiot. I'm serious. The point is not to feel better, though you might. The point is to interrupt the pattern, to break the circuit, to give your nervous system a reset. There's a technique called the 5-4-3-2-1 method, and it's devastatingly effective for acute anxiety. When you feel panic rising or rumination taking over, you stop and name 5 things you can see, out loud if possible. Blue mug, wooden table, crack in the wall, green plant, silver pen. Then 4 things you can physically touch, and you actually touch them. The texture of your jeans, the cool surface of your phone, the rough edge of a book, the smooth armrest. Then 3 things you can hear. Traffic outside, the hum of the refrigerator, your own breath. Then 2 things you can smell, even if you have to move to find them. Coffee, soap, then one thing you can taste. If there's nothing in your mouth, you can bite your lip gently or notice the taste that's always there. This process takes maybe 90 seconds, and what it does is pull you out of the future or the past and slam you back into the present moment, into your body, into the physical world where you actually exist. You cannot ruminate about the future or the past when you're fully anchored in right now. Another interrupt technique is scheduled worry time. This sounds counterintuitive, but it works. You tell your brain, okay, we're going to worry, but not now. We have an appointment to worry at 7 p.m. for 20 minutes, and we're going to do it thoroughly then. When the worry pops up at 2 in the afternoon, you acknowledge it. I see you, worry. We'll get to you at 7. And you redirect. At 7 p.m., you actually sit down and worry on purpose. You set a timer for 20 minutes and you let yourself catastrophize, ruminate, spiral, whatever. Give it full permission. What you'll often find is that when you're trying to worry on purpose, it suddenly doesn't feel as urgent or compelling. The worry was feeding off the resistance. When you stop resisting and schedule it instead, you take away its power. Then there's the cognitive interrupt I call stop, swap, start. You catch the thought. You literally say stop, either out loud or in your head. You name the pattern. That's rumination. That's catastrophizing. That's the comparison trap. Whatever it is, you call it by name. Then you swap it for a different thought, ideally one that's both true and forward-facing. I don't know what will happen, and I can prepare for what's in my control. That's a swap. Then you start a different action. You don't just sit there trying to maintain the new thought through willpower. You give your brain something else to do. Open your email and handle one thing. Pick up a book and read one page. Text a friend a genuine compliment. Make your bed. Do a single dish. Something tangible that your brain can latch onto instead of the spiral. The goal with all of these techniques is not to eliminate difficult thoughts. That's not possible and honestly not desirable. The goal is to prevent those thoughts from hijacking your entire operating system. You're training yourself to notice when a loop is starting and to interrupt it before it becomes the only thing you can think about. With practice, this gets faster. Eventually, you'll catch it in the first 5 seconds. You'll feel that familiar tug toward rumination, and before it even becomes a full sentence in your mind, you'll redirect. That's mastery. That's what we're building toward, but interrupting the pattern is only half the battle. The other half is replacing it with something more useful, which brings us to the architecture of the questions you ask yourself, because your brain is a question-answering machine. It can't not answer questions. When you ask yourself, why does this always happen to me, your brain will generate answers. They'll be terrible answers, probably rooted in shame and helplessness, but your brain will dutifully provide them. When you ask yourself, what's wrong with me, your brain will give you a list. When you ask yourself, why am I such a failure, your brain will build a case. It's just doing its job. It's answering the questions you're asking. The problem is not your brain. The problem is the questions. Backward-facing questions generate backward-facing answers. Why questions, especially why me or why always, are traps. They lead you into blame, into victimhood, into analysis of the unchangeable past. They don't generate options. They generate resignation. If you want different answers, you need to ask different questions. Forward-facing questions have a particular structure. They're open-ended, not yes or no. They assume agency, not helplessness. They focus on what's possible, not what's wrong. The most powerful phrase you can train yourself to use is, how might I? How might I improve this situation by 10%? How might I approach this differently? How might I get the information I need? How might I repair this relationship? How might I make this easier on myself? The phrase how might I does something magical. It presupposes that there are options, that you have some agency, and that the answer isn't immediately obvious, which gives your brain permission to be creative instead of just anxious. Another powerful swap is replacing why me with what now. Why me leads nowhere useful. It's either cosmic injustice or self-blame, neither of which helps. What now is pragmatic. It acknowledges that something happened, and it redirects attention to the next decision. What now doesn't mean you're okay with what happened. It doesn't mean you're not angry or hurt. It just means you're focusing on the only moment where you actually have power, which is this one, right now, and the choice you're about to make. There's a technique I teach called the outcome-first question. You start with where you want to end up, and then you work backward to figure out the path. So instead of asking, what should I do about this conflict with my coworker, which is vague and overwhelming, you ask, what does a good working relationship with this person look like? And what's one conversation that could move us closer to that? The specificity matters. Vague questions get vague answers. Specific questions get actionable answers. Here's a practice for you. Take out your phone or a piece of paper right now if you can, and write down 3 questions you've asked yourself recently. Be honest. What were the actual questions looping in your mind? Now look at each one and code it. Is it backward-facing or forward-facing? Is it about blame or about design? Is it about what's wrong or what's possible? For every backward question, I want you to rewrite it as a forward question. If you asked, why can't I ever get this right? Rewrite it as, what's one thing I could try differently next time? If you asked, why don't they respect me? Rewrite it as, what actions would earn the respect I want? If you asked, what's wrong with me? Rewrite it as, what strengths do I have that I'm not leveraging here? You're going to feel resistance when you do this. Your brain is going to tell you the forward questions are naive, unrealistic, fake. That's normal. That's just your brain preferring the familiar groove. Do it anyway. Write the forward questions. Say them out loud. Notice what happens in your body when you ask a forward question versus a backward one. The backward question probably tightens something. The forward question probably loosens something, even slightly. That physiological difference is information. Your body knows which direction leads to possibility. Once you've mastered the art of the forward question, the next skill is expanding your solution space. This is about training your brain to generate options instead of fixating on a single blocked path. When you're stressed or stuck, your perception literally narrows. It's called tunnel vision, and it's another evolutionary gift that's become a modern curse. When your ancestors faced immediate danger, they needed to focus on one thing: the threat. Broad creative thinking was a liability. You don't brainstorm escape routes when the tiger is charging. You run. But most of your modern problems are not tigers. They're complex, nuanced situations that benefit from multiple perspectives and creative solutions. Yet your brain still defaults to tunnel vision when it perceives a threat, which means you end up with one idea about how to solve something, and when that idea doesn't work, you feel helpless. Solution mode requires you to deliberately practice divergent thinking, which is the opposite of tunnel vision. You generate multiple possibilities before evaluating any of them. Quantity before quality. Volume before precision. This goes against your instinct. Your instinct is to think of one solution, analyze all the reasons it won't work, feel discouraged, and stop. Divergent thinking says no, we're generating 20 solutions first, without evaluation, and then we'll assess them. The goal is to get your brain unstuck from the single path it's obsessing over, and to remember that there are always multiple ways forward. There's a principle from improvisational comedy called yes, and that's transformative when applied to problem solving. In improv, when someone offers an idea, you don't shut it down. You accept it and build on it. Yes, and we could also try this. Yes, and what if we combine that with this other thing? The opposite of yes and is yes but, which is how most people think. Yes, I could ask for help, but they'll think I'm incompetent. Yes, I could try that approach, but it might fail. Yes, but kills possibility before it has a chance to develop. Yes, and lets possibility breathe and grow and mutate into something you never would have thought of if you'd shut down the first idea. Here's an exercise that will feel strange but works. I want you to think of a problem you're facing, and I want you to generate 5 impossible solutions. Solutions that violate the laws of physics. Solutions that require resources you don't have. Solutions that are completely absurd. If your problem is I can't afford my rent, an impossible solution might be win the lottery. Clone myself so I can work 3 jobs. Invent teleportation so I don't need a physical apartment. These are ridiculous, yes. That's the point. What this exercise does is break your brain out of the rigid, realistic groove it's stuck in. Once you have 5 impossible solutions, you extract one element from each that's actually doable. From win the lottery, you might extract the element of unexpected income, which could translate to selling something you own, picking up a side gig, or asking for a raise. From clone myself, you might extract the element of leveraging time differently, which could mean negotiating remote work to cut commute time or hiring a virtual assistant for 5 hours a week to free up time for higher paying work. You're not implementing the impossible solutions. You're using them to unlock creative thinking that's been suppressed by your sense of what's realistic. Another powerful question for expanding solution space is the 10x question. Instead of asking, how do I solve this problem? You ask, what would this look like if it were 10 times easier? Not 10% easier. 10 times. This forces your brain out of incremental thinking and into paradigm shift thinking. If you're struggling to find time to exercise, asking how do I fit in 30-minute workouts might generate a schedule optimization. Asking what would fitness look like if it were 10 times easier might generate a completely different answer. Like, what if I exercised for 3 minutes right when I wake up? So easy I can't say no, and built from there. Or what if I got a dog so exercise is built into the daily routine I already have? The 10x question bypasses the constraints you're unconsciously imposing and gets you thinking in terms of design rather than optimization. You can also borrow solutions from completely unrelated domains. This is called cross-domain inspiration, and it's how some of the best innovations happen. If you're struggling with team communication at work, you might ask, how do restaurants handle communication during a dinner rush? How do orchestras coordinate without talking? How do ant colonies share information? You're not implementing ant colony algorithms at your startup, but the cognitive act of looking at your problem through a different lens will generate ideas you never would have had otherwise. Your brain gets stuck in domain-specific grooves. Forcing it to jump domains shakes loose new patterns. Let me tell you about David. He ran a small architecture firm, and he was stuck on a project. The client wanted something innovative, but the budget was tight, the timeline was short, and every idea his team generated felt either too expensive or too boring. They'd been in meetings for weeks, spinning in circles, getting nowhere. David was problem-focused. This client is unrealistic. The budget is impossible. The timeline doesn't allow for creativity. Why did we even take this project? His team was feeding off his energy, and the whole studio felt stuck. Then David went to a concert. He wasn't thinking about work. He was just watching the band, and he noticed something. Between songs, the guitarist would make these small adjustments to his equipment, tiny tweaks that changed the sound in subtle ways, and the audience didn't notice the adjustments. They just noticed that the music sounded amazing. David had a thought. What if we approach the project like a musician approaches a set list? What if instead of trying to design one perfect innovative building, we take a conventional structure and make 6 small unexpected tweaks? Things that are individually affordable, but collectively create a totally different experience. He brought that idea back to his team the next morning. They ran with it. Instead of redesigning the entire floor plan, which was expensive, they kept the conventional layout and added 6 moments of surprise. An unexpected skylight in the bathroom. A reading note carved into a structural column. A hallway that curved instead of running straight. A door that was 7 feet tall instead of standard height. Windows in unexpected places. None of these changes blew the budget. Together, they transformed the building from generic to memorable. The client loved it. David's firm won an award for that project, all because he stopped fixating on the problem and borrowed a solution. That's the power of expanding your solution space. You go from, I can't figure this out, to there are 20 possible ways forward. I just need to test a few. The shift from scarcity to abundance in terms of options is one of the most profound changes solution mode creates. But even when you can see multiple options, you still need resources to execute them. Which brings us to one of the most overlooked aspects of solution thinking, learning to see what you already have. Problem-focused people suffer from scarcity vision. They see only what's missing. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have the right connections. I don't have the skills. I don't have the confidence. All of that might be partially true, but it's not the whole truth. And fixating on what you lack makes you blind to what you possess. Solution-focused people practice abundance vision, not in some woo-woo manifestation sense, but in a practical sense. They take inventory of their actual resources across multiple categories. Internal resources like skills, knowledge, past experiences, character strengths, physical health. Relational resources like the people in their network who have expertise, connections, goodwill toward them. Material resources like money, yes, but also tools, equipment, space, time, access. Informational resources like what they've learned, what they have access to online, what they could learn quickly if they knew what to focus on. When you deliberately map your resources, 2 things happen. First, you stop feeling helpless because you realize you have more than you thought. Second, you start seeing creative combinations. You might not have money, but you have time and a skill, which means you could trade that skill for what you need. You might not have expertise, but you have a friend who does, and you have goodwill with that friend, which means you could ask for an hour of advice. You might not have confidence, but you have evidence of past situations where you figured something out, which means you can mine those experiences for the approach that worked. There's an exercise I want you to do, not later, not when you finish listening to this, but right now if you can. Pause for a moment and think about a challenge you're facing. Now list 10 resources you have that are relevant to that challenge. Not 10 solutions, 10 resources, skills you possess, people you know, time you have available, money you could allocate, information you've gathered. strengths you've demonstrated before. Physical capabilities, access to places or tools, goodwill you've built. Don't move on until you have 10. This will be hard at first because your brain wants to list what you don't have. Refuse that temptation. Force your brain to see what you do have. Once you have your list of resources, ask yourself, have I fully leveraged these? Am I using them in combination, or am I ignoring some while wishing I had others? Often, people have exactly what they need, they're just not deploying it. They're waiting for some additional resource to appear before they act, when actually they could start now with what they have. There's a concept from entrepreneurship called the minimum viable product, the smallest version of an idea that you can test to see if it works. We need to apply this to our personal lives. What's the minimum viable solution? Not the perfect solution, not the complete solution. The smallest thing you could try that would give you information about whether you're heading in a useful direction. This is how you overcome paralysis. Paralysis happens when you confuse thinking with acting. You convince yourself that you need to figure out the entire plan before you take the first step. You need certainty. You need to know it'll work. You need to eliminate all risk. This is impossible, and while you're waiting for impossible certainty, you're not moving. Solution mode says, I don't need to know the whole path. I just need to know the next step. I don't need to guarantee success. I just need to run a small test and learn from it. Prototype thinking, that's what this is called, and it's one of the most liberating mindset shifts you can make. Let's say you're unhappy in your job and you're thinking about a career change. Problem mode looks at that and spirals. What if I can't find anything better? What if I waste years retraining for something I end up hating? What if I take a pay cut and can't afford my life? What if I'm too old? What if no one will hire me? These questions are paralyzing. Solution mode says, what's a small test I could run? You could spend 3 hours this week researching one alternative career and talking to one person who does that work. That's a prototype. It costs you almost nothing, and it gives you real information instead of hypothetical worry. Based on what you learn, you design the next small test. You're not making a huge, irreversible decision. You're running experiments. The 48-hour sprint is a technique that forces you out of analysis and into action. You identify something you've been overthinking. You give yourself 48 hours to try the smallest possible version of it. Not to do it perfectly, not to do the whole thing, just to start. To try, to learn. If you've been thinking about reaching out to someone for advice, the 48-hour sprint is, send the email in the next 2 days and see what happens. If you've been thinking about starting a side project, the sprint is, spend 1 hour on it before the weekend ends and see if you still feel interested. The deadline is short enough that you can't overthink it. The scope is small enough that failure is low stakes. But the act of doing something, anything, breaks the loop of thinking about doing something. Here's what happens when you practice prototype thinking consistently. You build a tolerance for uncertainty. You get comfortable with not knowing how things will turn out. You develop confidence not in your ability to predict the future, but in your ability to adapt to whatever happens. That's real confidence. That's resilient confidence. The kind that doesn't shatter the first time something doesn't go according to plan, and you will fail. Let me be very clear about this. You will run experiments that don't work. You will try solutions that make things worse. You will take action and regret it. This is not a sign that you're doing it wrong. This is a sign that you're doing it right. Failure is data. Failure is feedback. Failure is how you learn what doesn't work so you can adjust and try something else. The people who succeed the most are not the people who never fail. They're the people who fail faster, learn faster, and iterate faster than everyone else. I want you to start keeping what I call a failure resume. Every time you try something that doesn't work out the way you hoped, you write it down along with what you learned from it. Over time, you'll notice something interesting. A lot of your so-called failures led directly to breakthroughs. A lot of your wrong turns put you in position for the right turn. When you document this, you rewire the way you perceive failure. It stops being evidence of your inadequacy and starts being evidence of your willingness to experiment, which is actually a strength. Now, all of this works beautifully when you're alone in your head, but you don't live in isolation. You live in relationship with other people, and other people are often stuck in problem mode, and their problem mode can drag you back down if you're not careful. So we need to talk about how you maintain solution mode in the face of other people's complaint loops, victim narratives, and catastrophizing, without being a jerk about it and without abandoning your own practice. First principle, empathy, first always. If someone is in pain, if someone is venting, if someone is scared, the first thing they need is to feel heard, not fixed, not redirected, heard. If you jump straight to solutions before they've been acknowledged, You're going to damage the relationship, and you're not going to help them. So you listen, you validate. You say some version of that sounds really hard, or I can see why you're feeling that way, or that makes sense given what you're going through. You give them space to feel what they're feeling without rushing to make it better. This is not the same as joining them in problem mode. You can hold space for their pain without adopting their helplessness. After they feel heard, you can gently offer a forward-facing question. And the way you do this matters. You don't say, well, have you tried just thinking positively? That's dismissive. You don't say you just need to focus on solutions, not problems. That's condescending. What you can say is something like, this is hard, and I'm wondering, what would help right now? Or, I hear you and I'm curious. What do you think your options are? Or, that's a lot to deal with. What's one thing that might make it even a little bit easier? These questions are gentle invitations, not demands. They acknowledge the difficulty and they offer a doorway toward agency without forcing anyone through it. Some people will take the invitation. Some people won't, and that's okay. You can't force someone into solution mode. You can model it, you can offer it, but you can't make them adopt it. If someone is deeply committed to their story of victimhood or helplessness, they will resist any attempt to redirect them toward possibility. They'll tell you why nothing will work. They'll shoot down every idea. They'll explain in great detail why they're stuck and there's nothing to be done. When you recognize that pattern, you have a choice. You can keep trying to help, which will drain you and won't help them, or you can set a boundary. Boundaries with chronic complainers are essential for your own well-being. This doesn't mean you cut them off or judge them. It means you limit your exposure to their negativity. That second path is not easier. It's not better. It's just different, and it leads somewhere different. I've seen people go through unspeakable loss and come out the other side more compassionate, more purposeful, more alive than they were before. Not because the loss was good, the loss was terrible, but because they chose eventually to let the loss be a doorway into a different way of being, rather than a wall that stops them forever. That's post-traumatic growth, and it's real, and it's not something you force. It's something you allow. When you're ready, by asking forward-facing questions even in the darkest moments, the crisis protocol is simpler than the regular solution mode. Practice because you don't have bandwidth for complexity when you're in acute distress. The crisis protocol is, what's the next right thing? Not the next 10 things. Not the complete solution. Just the next single thing. Do I need to eat? Do I need to sleep? Do I need to call someone? Do I need to cry? Do I need to move my body? Do I need to make one decision that can't wait? You take it one step at a time, and each step is small enough that you can actually do it. Over time, those small steps add up to forward movement. And forward movement, even slow forward movement, is how you get through crisis. There's a concept called the grief bridge, and it's the ability to hold loss and possibility at the same time. You don't have to choose between them. You can honor what you lost and still imagine what comes next. You can miss someone and still build a life worth living. You can acknowledge that something terrible happened and still believe that good things are possible. This is not betrayal of the loss. This is integration of the loss. You're not pretending it didn't happen. You're deciding it won't be the only thing that defines what happens after. For large-scale systemic problems, problems that are beyond your individual control, solution mode looks different. You can't fix climate change by yourself. You can't solve political polarization by yourself. You can't end systemic injustice by yourself. But you can identify leverage points where your specific actions matter. You can vote. You can organize. You can educate. You can contribute. You can influence your immediate circle. You can model a different way. And you can release what you cannot control without feeling guilty about the release. Trying to control the uncontrollable is not virtuous. It's exhausting and it leads to despair. Focusing on your sphere of influence is not apathy. It's wisdom. Let me tell you about Marcus. He worked in healthcare administration, and every day he came home crushed by the weight of what he couldn't fix. The system was broken. Insurance denials left patients without care. Staff were overworked and burning out. Budgets were impossibly tight. Policy decisions made by people far removed from patient care created obstacles he had to navigate daily. For months he carried all of it. He'd lie awake running through everything that was wrong, everything that shouldn't be this way, everyone who was failing to do their job properly. His partner noticed he'd stopped laughing. His friends noticed he'd stopped showing up. One night after a particularly brutal week, his partner asked him a question that changed everything. She said, "What's the one thing you actually control in all of this?" He started to answer with everything he didn't control, the automatic response, but she stopped him. "No," she said. "The one thing you do control. What is it?" He sat with that for a long time. Finally, he said, "I control how I treat the 3 people who report directly to me. I control whether I create a culture of problem solving or a culture of complaining in my department. I control whether I show up to patient interactions with presence or with resentment. I control what I advocate for in meetings, even if I can't control the outcome. That's what I control." The next week, he stopped trying to fix the whole system. He focused on his 3 direct reports. He started their team meetings with a new question. What's one thing we could make better this week within our control? The first week they looked at him like he'd lost his mind. They were used to venting sessions. By week 3, they were generating ideas. One person streamlined a process that had been frustrating patients. Another person created a simple checklist that reduced errors. The third person started a peer support system for staff who were struggling. None of these things fixed the healthcare system, but they made that small corner of it more humane. Staff morale improved. Patient complaints in their department dropped. Other departments started asking what they were doing differently. Marcus still saw all the problems. He still wished the system were different. But he stopped carrying the weight of problems he couldn't solve and started putting his energy into the narrow band where he had influence. He slept better. He laughed again. He stayed in healthcare instead of burning out and leaving. 5 years later, he's a director, and the culture-building practices he learned in that small department have spread to an entire hospital network. He didn't fix the system. He found his leverage point and pushed on it consistently. That's what solution mode looks like with systemic problems. You name what you can't control, you release it without guilt, and you focus your finite energy on what you can actually influence. It's not resignation. It's strategic clarity. The both-and mastery is the advanced form of solution thinking. It's the ability to hold paradox without needing to resolve it. Life is hard and life is beautiful. People are disappointing and people are amazing. You're doing your best and you could do better. The situation is genuinely difficult and there are still options. Both things are true. Your brain wants to collapse paradox into either or. Either it's hopeless or it's fine. Either I'm a failure or I'm a success. Either this relationship is good or it's bad. But reality is almost always both and. The more you can tolerate holding both sides of a paradox, the less you'll be thrown by complexity and ambiguity. You'll be able to see the problem clearly and still move toward solutions, because you've stopped needing the problem to disappear before you act. Here's a practice script for building both-and capacity. Find a quiet space where you won't be interrupted for 10 minutes. Bring to mind something in your life that feels contradictory or stuck. Maybe it's a relationship that has both good and bad elements. Maybe it's a job that's both draining and meaningful. Maybe it's grief over a loss combined with gratitude for what you had. Hold both parts in your awareness at the same time. Don't try to reconcile them or figure out which one is more true. Just notice this and this. Both things coexist. Say it out loud if you're alone. This is difficult and I'm handling it. I'm disappointed and I'm hopeful. I made a mistake and I'm learning from it. I feel stuck and I'm taking action. The and is where the power lives. The and is where you stop being split in half by contradiction and start being whole enough to hold complexity. Practice this daily for 2 weeks with different paradoxes and watch how your tolerance for ambiguity expands. You'll stop needing things to be simple before you can move forward. You'll operate effectively in the mess of real life. Now we need to talk about what happens when you slip. Because you will slip. You'll have a week where you practice solution mode beautifully, and then something will knock you sideways and you'll spend 3 days in problem loops like you never learned any of this. That's not failure. That's being human. What matters is whether you have a plan for getting back on track, because without a plan, one slip becomes a slide becomes a backslide, and before you know it, you're right back where you started, convinced this whole thing doesn't work. The relapse-proofing plan starts with identifying your specific triggers in advance. What situations reliably knock you out of solution mode and into problem spirals? For most people, it's a combination of stressors. Sleep deprivation is a huge one. When you're exhausted, your prefrontal cortex goes offline and your amygdala takes over, which means you lose access to higher-order thinking and default to threat scanning. Hunger is another. Low blood sugar makes everything feel more dire than it is. Isolation is another. When you're alone too much, your thoughts echo and amplify without reality checking. Conflict is another. An argument with someone you care about can send you spinning for days. Comparison is another. Scrolling social media and seeing everyone else's highlight reel can trigger inadequacy spirals fast. Make a list right now of your top 5 triggers. The situations where you predictably lose your center and fall back into old patterns. Once you have that list, you create if-then plans for each trigger. These are called implementation intentions, and research shows they're dramatically more effective than general intentions. A general intention is, I'll try to stay in solution mode. An implementation intention is, if I notice I'm exhausted and starting to spiral, then I will go to bed immediately, even if it's early, and deal with whatever I'm worried about tomorrow. If I notice I'm comparing myself to others online, then I will close the app and name 3 things I'm building in my own life. If I notice I'm in conflict and rehearsing arguments, then I will text one supportive friend and ask them to help me redirect. The if-then structure creates a pre-made decision. When you're triggered, you don't have to think about what to do. You already know. You've decided in advance. This removes the cognitive load of trying to figure out the right response when you're least capable of good judgment. You also need a reset ritual for when you've been off track for more than a day. This is a specific sequence of actions that brings you back to center. Mine is this. I go for a 30-minute walk without my phone. I come home and journal for 10 minutes, just free writing about what knocked me off track and what I'm feeling. Then I write one forward-facing question at the top of a fresh page. Then I write 5 possible answers to that question, no matter how small or imperfect. Then I pick one and do it immediately, within the next hour if possible. That whole sequence takes maybe 90 minutes, and by the end of it, I'm back. I've interrupted the spiral, I've reconnected with agency, I've taken action. I'm in solution mode again. You need your own version of this. Design it now, while you're clear-headed, so you have it ready for when you're not. Another critical piece of relapse proofing is the concept of minimum viable practice. When life gets overwhelming, you can't maintain the full suite of solution mode practices. That's fine. You don't have to. What you need is a stripped-down version that you can do no matter what. For me, it's 1 question per day. No matter how bad the day is, no matter how much I've spiraled, before I go to sleep, I ask myself, what's one thing I could try tomorrow? That's it. I don't have to journal. I don't have to meditate. I don't have to do the full resilience architecture. I just have to ask one forward question. That keeps the pilot light on. That maintains the thread. When things stabilize, I can expand back to the full practice. But the minimum viable practice ensures I never fully lose the connection. What's your minimum viable practice? What's the one thing you could do every single day, even on your worst day, that keeps you tethered to solution mode? Decide that now. Write it down. Make it so simple you can't fail at it. 1 forward-facing question. 1 redirect when you catch yourself spiraling. 1 moment of resource inventory. 1 small action. Whatever it is, make it your non-negotiable. The thing you do no matter what. Now let's talk about the 30-day intensive, a structured program for embedding solution mode deep enough that it becomes automatic. This is for when you're ready to go all in, when you've practiced the basics and you want to accelerate the transformation. I'm going to walk you through day by day what to focus on, and if you follow this sequence, you'll come out the other side with solution thinking as your new default. Day 1, baseline audit. Today you're just observing, not changing anything. Track every time you notice yourself in problem mode. Don't judge it. Don't try to stop it. Just mark it. Tally in a notebook. Move a coin from one pocket to another. Whatever works. At the end of the day, count how many times you caught yourself. That's your baseline. Most people are shocked at how high the number is. That's good information. You can't change what you don't see. Day 2, the interrupt-only day. Today you practice only one skill, interrupting the spiral. Every time you catch yourself in problem mode, you interrupt it physically. Stand up, do 5 jumping jacks, splash water on your face, sprint in place for 10 seconds. You're not yet redirecting to solutions. You're just building the muscle of interruption. By the end of the day, your nervous system will start to associate problem thoughts with physical movement, which begins to break the automatic loop. Day 3, the question swap day. Today, every time you catch a backward question, you rewrite it as a forward question. Keep a running list in your phone or notebook. By the end of the day, you should have at least 10 question pairs. Why did this happen becomes what can I learn from this? Why do they always becomes how might I influence this differently? The act of writing forces you to slow down and actually process the redirect instead of just thinking about it vaguely. Day 4, the resource inventory day. Today you're hunting for assets. Every conversation, every object you interact with, every skill you use, you ask, is this a resource? Could this help me with something I'm working on? By the end of the day, you'll have a list of 50 or more resources you didn't consciously recognize yesterday. This rewires scarcity thinking at a neural level. Day 5, the prototype day. Today you take action on something you've been overthinking. Anything, doesn't matter what. The project you've been planning for months, you work on it for 30 minutes. The conversation you've been avoiding, you initiate it. The skill you've been wanting to learn, you take the first lesson. The point is not outcome. The point is building your bias toward action over analysis. Day 6, the celebration day. Today you practice noticing and marking wins. Every single time you redirect successfully, you pause for 3 seconds and acknowledge it. You say, I did the thing. You physically mark it. You let yourself feel pleased. This is not self-indulgent. This is how you train your brain to repeat behaviors. Reward strengthens neural pathways. By the end of the day, you should have marked at least 20 micro-wins. Day 7, the reflection day. Today you review the first week. What's getting easier? What's still hard? What patterns are you noticing about your specific triggers? What adjustments would make this more sustainable? Write for 15 minutes. This reflection builds metacognition, and metacognition is the foundation of lasting change. Day 8, the visualization day. Today you spend 10 minutes in the morning imagining yourself going through a difficult situation in solution mode. See yourself noticing the trigger, interrupting the pattern, asking the forward question, taking action. Visualization activates the same neural circuits as actual practice, so you're getting reps without needing to wait for a real situation. Do this visualization 3 times throughout the day. Day 9, the relationship day. Today you practice redirecting one conversation with someone else. When they start complaining or catastrophizing, you listen with empathy first, and then you gently offer, what do you think might help? Or what would you want to be different? You're not fixing them. You're modeling the redirect and seeing what happens. Notice how it affects the conversation. Notice how it affects your own energy. Day 10, the trigger mapping day. Today, you pay specific attention to what knocks you out of solution mode. When do you slip? What time of day? What situations? What people? After what events? By the end of the day, you should have a clear list of your top 5 triggers. Tomorrow, you'll design interventions for each. Day 11, the if-then day. Today, you create implementation intentions for each of your triggers. If I'm exhausted, then I will go to bed by 9 no matter what. If I'm hungry, then I will eat something with protein within 10 minutes. If I'm spiraling about work, then I will text my accountability partner. Write these out. Say them out loud. Install them as pre-made decisions. Day 12, the morning routine day. Today you design and implement a 5-minute morning practice that primes you for solution mode. Mine is 1 forward question, 3 things I'm grateful for, 1 action I'll take before noon. Yours might be different. The point is to set your mental direction before the day's demands start pulling you in reactive directions. Day 13, the environment design day. Today you modify your physical environment to support solution thinking. Remove or reduce triggers. Add visual reminders. Change your phone wallpaper to a forward question. Put a sticky note on your bathroom mirror. Move the furniture in your workspace. Environmental cues shape behavior more than willpower ever will. Day 14, the halfway celebration day. You're 2 weeks in. That's significant. Today you take stock of what's changed. Look back at your baseline from day 1. How many problem loops are you catching now versus then? How quickly are you redirecting? What feels different in your body? What feels different in your relationships? Write it down. You've already changed more than you probably realize. Day 15, the constraint removal day. Today you take one problem and you imagine solving it without any constraints. Money is no object. Time is no object. Other people will cooperate fully. What would you do? Let yourself think wild, impossible thoughts. Then extract the core elements from those impossible solutions and ask, what's the smallest version of that element I could actually test? Day 16, the beginner's mind day. Today you approach one familiar problem as if you're seeing it for the first time. Forget everything you think you know about it. Ask naive questions. What is this really? Why does it exist? What would someone from a different culture or time period think about this? Beginner's mind unlocks creativity that expertise often suppresses. Day 17, the failure inventory day. Today you make a list of 10 things you tried that didn't work, projects that flopped, conversations that went badly, experiments that failed. For each one, you write what you learned. This reframes failure from evidence of inadequacy to data for iteration. By the end of the day, you'll see your past differently. Day 18, the social proof day. Today you identify 3 people you know who think in solution mode naturally. Maybe you've never named it as such, but you know people who respond to difficulty with possibility instead of despair. Study them. If you can, ask them how they think about problems. What do they do when they feel stuck? You're collecting models, expanding your sense of what's possible. Day 19, the accountability day. Today you tell someone about this practice. You share what you're learning. You ask them to check in with you once a week for the next month and ask, how's solution mode going? External accountability makes internal practice stickier. Plus, teaching something is one of the best ways to learn it more deeply. Day 20, the temptation day. Today you intentionally expose yourself to a minor trigger and practice your response. Not a huge trigger that will overwhelm you. A small one. The goal is to get a repetition under controlled circumstances, to prove to yourself that you can handle the trigger and redirect. Each successful rep builds confidence. Day 21, the 3-week milestone. 3 weeks is when habits start to take root. Today you assess what's becoming automatic, what still requires effort, what modifications would help. Adjust your practice based on what you're learning. There's no one-size-fits-all version of solution mode. You're customizing it to fit your brain and your life. Day 22, the expansion day. Today you apply solution mode to a problem you've been avoiding. The big one, the scary one. The one you've been convinced is unsolvable. You're not solving it today. You're just asking one forward question about it and generating 5 possible answers. You're proving to yourself that even the biggest problems have potential pathways forward. Day 23, the body-based day. Today you focus on the physical sensations associated with problem mode versus solution mode. When you're spiraling, where do you feel it? Chest, stomach, shoulders? When you redirect successfully, what changes physically? Learning to read your body's signals gives you earlier warning that you're slipping, which means you can intervene faster. Day 24, the gratitude resource day. Today you practice linking gratitude to resource inventory. For everything you're grateful for, you ask, how is this also a resource? I'm grateful for my health becomes my health is a resource that gives me energy and mobility to act. I'm grateful for my friend becomes my friend is a resource who has skills and perspective I can learn from. This double-layer practice strengthens both gratitude and abundance thinking simultaneously. Day 25, the rapid iteration day. Today you run 3 small experiments on the same problem. You're practicing speed of testing. Try something, see what happens, adjust, try something else. The goal is to build comfort with rapid cycles of action and learning rather than slow cycles of planning and delay. Day 26, the boundary practice day. Today you set one boundary with someone who drains your energy with their problem focus. You do it kindly but clearly. You notice how it feels. You notice what you learn about yourself and about them. Boundaries are a form of resource protection, and resource protection is essential for sustaining solution mode. Day 27, the teaching day. Today you teach one element of solution mode to someone else. Maybe a kid, maybe a colleague, maybe a friend who's struggling. Teaching forces you to clarify your understanding and strengthens your own commitment to the practice. Day 28, the crisis simulation day. Today you imagine a worst-case scenario and you walk yourself through how you'd apply solution mode to it. Not to catastrophize, but to build confidence that even in the worst situations, you have a framework. You don't have to be blindsided. You have tools. Day 29, the identity statement day. Today you write a new identity statement. I am someone who thinks in solutions. I am someone who sees obstacles as design challenges. I am someone who takes action even when uncertain. Write it. Say it out loud. Read it multiple times. You're not lying. You're declaring. Thousands of tiny actions over the past month have earned you the right to this identity. Day 30, the integration day. Today you look back over the entire month. You read through your notes from day 1. You see how far you've come. You identify which practices you'll keep, which you'll drop, what you'll do differently going forward. You make a plan for month 2, which will be less structured but still intentional. You celebrate. You've rewired your brain in 30 days. Not completely, not perfectly, but significantly, measurably. Real change has occurred. After the 30-day intensive, you don't stop practicing. You shift into maintenance mode. This looks like continuing your minimum viable practice daily, doing your weekly review, and doing a deeper monthly reflection. You watch for signs of backsliding, and you use your reset ritual when needed. You keep refining your approach based on what you learn about yourself. Solution mode is not a destination you reach and then you're done. It's a practice you maintain, and the practice gets easier and more natural over time until it genuinely becomes who you are. Let me tell you one more story, because I want you to see what this looks like over the long arc. Her name was Rachel. She came to solution mode thinking in her late 30s, after a decade of chronic anxiety and depression that had been resistant to traditional treatment. She was on medication, she'd done years of therapy, and she was still spending hours every day in rumination loops that left her exhausted and stuck. A friend gave her a book about cognitive reframing, and something clicked. She started practicing. At first it was clumsy. She'd catch herself in a spiral 20 minutes in, after she'd already worked herself into full panic. But she'd still redirect. She'd still ask the forward question. She'd still take one small action. Over months, the catch time got shorter. 20 minutes became 10 minutes, became 5 minutes, became 30 seconds. She started noticing the very first thought that began the spiral, and she'd interrupt it there. The anxiety didn't disappear, but it stopped controlling her life. She started taking risks she'd avoided for years. She applied for a promotion she was sure she'd never get. She got it. She started a side business she'd been dreaming about for 5 years but convinced herself was impossible. It worked. She repaired a relationship with her sister that had been fractured for a decade by asking what would help instead of who was right. 3 years into the practice, someone who'd known her in her anxious years ran into her at a coffee shop. They talked for 20 minutes, and as they were leaving, the person said, "You're different. I can't put my finger on it, but something about you is fundamentally different." Rachel knew exactly what it was. She didn't think the same way anymore. Problems still existed. Life was still hard sometimes. But her brain didn't automatically spiral. It automatically searched for options. That shift, that fundamental rewiring, changed everything downstream from it. That's what's possible. Not a life without problems. A life where problems are just information instead of identity. A life where stuck is temporary instead of permanent. A life where you trust yourself to figure things out, not because you have all the answers, but because you know how to ask the questions that lead to answers. At a certain point, solution mode stops being something you do and starts being who you are. This is the integration phase, and it's where the practice becomes identity. You're no longer someone who's trying to think in solution mode. You're a solution thinker. It's baked into how you see the world, how you respond to difficulty, how you talk to yourself, how you show up in relationships. This doesn't mean you never have a bad day or never fall back into old patterns. It means when you do fall back, you recognize it quickly, you redirect gently, and you don't shame yourself for being human. Identity level change is different from behavior level change. Behavior level change is, I'm going to practice asking forward-facing questions. Identity level change is, I'm someone who looks for solutions instead of dwelling on problems. The identity version is stickier. It's more resilient. When you see yourself as a solution thinker, you act in ways that reinforce that identity automatically. You don't have to remind yourself. It's just who you are. Getting to identity level change requires repetition over time. You can't think your way into a new identity. You have to act your way into it. Every time you redirect a thought, you're voting for the identity of solution thinker. Every time you take action instead of ruminating, you're casting a vote. After thousands of votes, the identity shifts. You wake up one day and realize, I don't think the way I used to. I don't spiral the way I used to. I don't feel as helpless as I used to. Something fundamental has changed. That's the moment you know the work has paid off. Here's how you know you've reached integration. You're in a genuinely difficult situation, the kind that would have sent old you into a week-long spiral, and your first thought is, not why is this happening, but what's my move? It's automatic. You didn't force it. You didn't remind yourself to think that way. Your brain just went there naturally. That's neural rewiring complete enough that it's become your default. You'll still have moments where you catch yourself slipping, especially under extreme stress or exhaustion, but those moments become rarer and shorter, and the recovery is faster. Another sign of integration is that other people start commenting on it. They notice you're different. They might not be able to articulate exactly what's different, but they feel it. You're calmer in crisis. You're more creative under pressure. You're less reactive in conflict. You generate ideas where others see walls. You move forward while others stay stuck. They start coming to you for advice, asking how you think about problems, wondering what you do that they're not doing. That's when you know. Teaching solution mode to the next generation is one of the most important things you can do. Kids are sponges. They learn how to think by watching the adults around them. If they watch you catastrophize and blame and ruminate, that's the operating system they'll install. If they watch you acknowledge difficulty, redirect toward possibility, and take action, that's what they'll learn. You don't have to lecture them about it. You don't have to make it a thing. You just have to live it in front of them. When something goes wrong in your presence, narrate your thought process out loud occasionally. Well, that didn't work. Let me think about what I could try instead. What resources do I have here? What's one small thing I could test? That casual narration gives them a template they'll carry for life. When they come to you with a problem, resist the urge to immediately solve it for them or dismiss it. Ask them, what do you think you could try? What would make this a little better? If you could do anything, what would you want? You're training them to generate their own solutions, to see themselves as capable, to understand that problems are not permanent states but situations that can be influenced. I watched a mother do this with her 8-year-old son. He came home from school upset because a friend had said something mean to him. His first instinct was to say, "He's a jerk, I hate him, I'm never talking to him again." Classic problem mode for an 8-year-old. His mom listened. She validated. She said, "That sounds really hurtful. I'm sorry that happened." Then she asked, "What do you want to happen with this friendship?" He thought about it. He said, "I want us to be friends again, but I want him to know he hurt my feelings." She asked, "What's one thing you could try that might help with that?" He said, "I could tell him tomorrow that what he said made me sad." She asked, "Do you want to practice what you might say?" They role-played it for 5 minutes. The next day, he had the conversation. The friend apologized. They were fine. But more importantly than the specific outcome, that kid learned a pattern. When something hurts, you feel it, and then you ask, "What do I want, and what could I try?" That's a pattern that will serve him for the rest of his life. And he learned it in one 10-minute conversation with a parent who knew how to ask forward-facing questions. You can do this with teenagers too, though it's trickier because teenagers are developmentally wired to reject parental advice. With teenagers, it's even more important to model rather than preach. Live solution mode visibly. When you're struggling with something, let them see you work through it out loud. Let them see you catch yourself spiraling and redirect. Let them see you try something, have it not work, and try something else without falling apart. That's powerful teaching. When they do come to you with problems, which they will eventually even if they act like they won't, ask permission before offering anything. Do you want advice or do you just want me to listen? If they say advice, ask, what have you already thought about trying? Start with what they've already generated. Add to it if needed. But don't take over their thinking. That undermines the very thing you're trying to build, which is their confidence in their own capacity to solve problems. The ripple effect of solution mode extends far beyond your own life. When you change how you think, you change how you act. When you change how you act, you change your outcomes. When your outcomes change, other people notice. They ask what's different. They see possibility in their own situations that they didn't see before. They start to shift, and they influence others. One person practicing solution mode consistently can change the culture of an entire workplace, an entire family, an entire community. Not by preaching, by presence, by modeling a different way. I've seen this happen in organizations. One leader starts thinking this way. They bring it to their team. The team's meetings change. Instead of complaint sessions, they become generative. Instead of people leaving drained, they leave energized with clear next actions. That team's performance improves. Other teams notice. They ask what that team is doing differently. The practice spreads. Within 2 years, the entire organization has a different feel. People solve problems faster. They innovate more. They recover from setbacks quicker. Turnover drops because people don't burn out as fast. All because one person decided to think differently and did it consistently enough that it became contagious. You are that one person. Whether you realize it or not, whether you feel qualified or not, you have influence. The people in your life watch you. They pick up on your patterns. They absorb your energy. If you practice solution mode, some of them will learn it by proximity. You won't even have to try to teach them. They'll just start thinking that way because they've been around you while you've been thinking that way. That's how culture changes. Not through mandates or programs. Through individuals who change themselves and stay changed long enough for others to notice and be influenced. There's a concept in systems theory called a keystone species. In an ecosystem, a keystone species is one whose presence or absence has a disproportionate impact on the entire system. Remove the keystone species, and the whole ecosystem collapses. Reintroduce it, and the ecosystem stabilizes. You can be a keystone thinker in your ecosystem. The family member who breaks the generational pattern of helplessness and blame. The colleague who shifts the team from reactive to proactive. The friend who models possibility when everyone else is stuck in despair. You don't have to change everyone. You just have to be the stable point of solution-focused thinking, and the system will reorganize around that stability. Now let me address something that's probably occurring to you. You're listening to all of this, and part of you is thinking, this sounds great, but I'm not sure I can sustain it. I'm not sure I'm strong enough, or disciplined enough, or optimistic enough. Let me be very clear. This is not about strength or discipline or optimism. This is about practice. This is about deciding to redirect your thinking 10,000 times until redirection becomes automatic. You don't have to be strong. You just have to be willing to try again after you slip. You don't have to be disciplined. You just have to have a system that makes the practice easier than not practicing. You don't have to be optimistic. You just have to be willing to ask what's possible even when you don't feel hopeful. The people who succeed at this are not special. They're not more capable than you. They're not blessed with better brains or easier lives. They just practiced consistently for long enough that it stuck. That's the only difference. Consistency over time. Not perfection. Not constant progress. Just showing up to the practice more days than not. For long enough that the practice becomes part of who they are. You will have weeks where you practice beautifully and weeks where you forget everything you've learned. You'll have breakthroughs and backslides. You'll have moments where you think this is working and moments where you think this is pointless. All of that is normal. All of that is part of the process. What matters is that you don't quit during the discouraging parts. What matters is that you keep coming back. Every time you come back, the practice gets a little bit stronger. Every time you redirect after a backslide, you're proving to yourself that you can recover, and that proof builds resilience that serves you in the next challenge. Think of this as a long game. You're not trying to transform your entire life by next Tuesday. You're trying to shift your default thinking patterns over months and years until eventually you look back and realize you're a completely different thinker than you were when you started. The person you're becoming is patient. The person you're becoming trusts the process. The person you're becoming knows that small, consistent actions compound into massive change over time. Be that person now. Make decisions from that future identity. Ask yourself, what would the version of me who's already integrated solution mode do in this situation? Then do that. There's a commitment that comes with this practice, and I want to name it explicitly before we finish. The commitment is this: I will choose forward thinking even when it's hard, even when I don't feel like it, even when backward thinking would feel more justified or more satisfying in the moment, even when other people are stuck in problem mode and trying to pull me back in, even when I'm tired, even when I'm scared, even when I'm hurt. I will pause. I will redirect. I will ask the forward question. I will take the next small step. Not because I'm perfect, not because I'll never falter, but because I've decided that this is how I want to live, and I'm willing to practice it until it becomes who I am. Say that out loud if you're in a position to do so. I will choose forward thinking even when it's hard. Let yourself hear your own voice making that commitment. If you can't say it out loud right now, say it in your mind with intention. This is a promise you're making to yourself. And it's the most important promise you can make because everything else in your life flows from how you think. You've made it to the end of this audiobook, which means you've already demonstrated something important. You're willing to invest time in changing how you think. That willingness is the seed of everything that comes next. You now have the framework. You understand the problem trap and why your brain defaults to it. You know how to interrupt rumination before it gains momentum. You know how to ask forward-facing questions that generate options instead of anxiety. You have the 30-day intensive plan if you want structured acceleration. You have the relapse-proofing strategies for when you slip. You have the minimum viable practice for when life gets overwhelming. You have implementation intentions and reset rituals and celebration practices. You have everything you need. The only question remaining is, what will you do with it? Will you nod along, agree that it sounds useful, and then go back to your default patterns? Or will you actually practice? Will you catch yourself in the next problem loop that arises, which might be 20 minutes from now, or 5 minutes or 30 seconds, and will you redirect? Will you ask the forward question? Will you take one small action? Everything changes if you practice. Nothing changes if you don't. It really is that simple and that hard. There's no secret technique I'm withholding. There's no advanced practice that makes this effortless. There's just the decision to redirect, made over and over and over again, until redirecting is what you do automatically. That's the work. That's the whole work. You started this audiobook stuck in loops. You now see exits everywhere. You've been given a map to rewire neural pathways that most people don't even know exist. Problems no longer have to define you. Solutions can. Every challenge is now a design opportunity if you choose to see it that way. You've built a foundation for a brain that thinks forward automatically. But the foundation only becomes a structure if you keep building on it, day after day, choice by choice, redirect by redirect. I want you to imagine something with me as we close. Imagine yourself 6 months from now. You've been practicing solution mode consistently, not perfectly. You've slipped and recovered more times than you can count, but you've kept coming back. It's starting to feel natural now. You're in a situation that 6 months ago you would have spiraled over for days. But now you notice the first thread of problem thinking, and almost without conscious effort, you redirect. You ask the forward question. You see 3 possible paths where you used to see only a wall. You take action on one of them. The whole process takes maybe 90 seconds. Afterward, you don't even think about it much because it wasn't a big dramatic thing. It was just how you think now. That's what we're building toward. That ease, that automaticity, that sense that solution thinking is just who you are, not something you have to force. You get there through repetition, through practice, through commitment, through showing up to the work even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it, because that's when it counts most. Your brain is more plastic than you think, more changeable, more adaptable. The grooves you've worn into it over decades of problem thinking can be filled in, and new grooves can be carved. Not overnight, not without effort, but absolutely definitively possible. The neuroscience is clear on this. The question is not whether you can change. The question is whether you will. This isn't the end. This is your new operating system. Go design the life that was waiting for this version of you. The version that doesn't waste years in rumination. The version that feels stuck for hours instead of months. The version that sees obstacles and immediately starts looking for ways around, over, under, or through. The version that builds, that experiments, that fails and learns and tries again. The version that asks, what's possible? The version that moves forward. That version of you is available right now, not someday when you're more ready, more healed, more certain, more confident. Right now, this moment. The first redirect is the hardest. After that, it gets easier. Each one after that gets a little easier still. Until one day you realize it's not hard anymore. It's just what you do, so take a breath. Think of one thing that's been bothering you. Just one thing. And ask yourself just this once, what's one small thing I could try? Then do it. Today, not tomorrow. Not when you have more time or more energy or more clarity. Today, right now if possible. Send the email. Make the call. Take the first step. Try the thing. Whatever it is, do it before your brain talks you out of it. Do it while the momentum from this audiobook is still with you. That's solution mode. That's how you train your brain to think forward. That's how you build a life that moves. Not a life without problems. A life where problems are simply the raw material for your next design. A life where stuck is a temporary state, not a permanent identity. A life where you trust yourself to figure things out because you've proven to yourself, through hundreds of small actions, that you can. You have everything you need. You always did. You just needed to learn how to see it, how to access it, how to use it. Now you know. Now the only thing left is to practice, to build the reps, to prove to yourself what you're capable of. Go build something. Go try something. Go forward. Your brain is ready. Your life is waiting. The only question is, are you willing? I think you are. I think you wouldn't have made it this far if you weren't. So go. Practice. Redirect. Build. Become the solution thinker you're meant to be. The world needs more people who see exits where others see walls. Be one of them. Starting now.